We talked at the beginning of the month about the weapons I don't want to see return in Borderlands 4, but what about the weapons I do want to see come back for the next entry? There aren't actually too many weapons that truly stand out to me in this game, but there are a few that I absolutely adore and would love to see come back. Hey Vault Hunters, I'm Constant Canadian, and these are the 5 guns that I would love to see return in Borderlands 4. Starting off the list, we have the King and Queen's Calls. These two pistols, despite having different names, are the exact same weapon, with the King's Call coming in fire or shock, and the Queen's Call coming in corrosive, cryo, or radiation. Hand cannons in Borderlands games oftentimes don't really live up to the name, oftentimes firing super slow while not having a great damage output overall. Weapons like the Borderlands 3 Unforgiven, the Amazing Grace, the Rex, the Borderlands 2 Unforgiven, and while sure, oftentimes they can get the job done, you're almost always better off with a quicker firing pistol with slightly lower damage. This is not the case with the Queen's and King's Call though, with each critical hit ricocheting 3 bullets at nearby enemies and restoring 3 ammo to your magazine, which can keep this otherwise ammo-hungry pistol firing theoretically forever. To make this pistol even crazier, the ricochet projectiles do splash damage, and all damage dealt with the King and Queen's Calls give 12.5% lifesteal. This pistol is absolutely amazing, and it is more than capable of beating most content in the game, provided your aim is good or you're playing fadeaway flak, which makes this weapon super easy to use to its full potential. Seeing this pistol return in Borderlands 4 would be super cool with all the new movement mechanics. In a similar vein, I would also love to see the Masterwork Crossbow and the Hail return. While these two weapons are massively different, they also have one very big thing in common. They fire an arcing projectile. The Masterwork Crossbow shoots one arcing projectile with insanely high single shot damage, and the Hail is a full auto or 3-shot burst assault rifle that shoots arcing projectiles with very high damage and an insane critical hit modifier of 150%. Both the Hail and the Crossbow have a very high learning curve in exchange for very good damage. Learning to use these weapons is fun, at least in my opinion, and makes for a very interesting time. Realistically, both of these weapons making a return would be rather redundant as they both serve very similar purposes, but I would absolutely love to see at least one of these weapons make a return in Borderlands 4. Weapons that have a projectile pattern that needs to be learned have always been a lot of fun for me. Weapons like the Lyuda, the Yellow Cake, the Hail, and the Lead Storm that help break up the repetitiveness of simply pointing and shooting at an enemy. Now, obviously not every single weapon in this game should have an overly complex projectile pattern that makes it a pain to use in any traditional way. But having a select few weapons in Borderlands 4 like the Hail or the Lyuda would be incredibly cool to see and would, at least for me, make a couple of weapons even more interesting to use. Another awesome weapon that I would absolutely love to see make a return in this franchise is the Reflux and Brainstormer. Just like the Hail and the Masterwork Crossbow, having both of these weapons come back is incredibly redundant, as there could just be one version with multiple elements. However, seeing the Reflux come back in Borderlands 4 would be absolutely awesome. The Reflux is honestly the perfect mobbing weapon for every single character and allows builds with very high single target damage to spread that damage around the battlefield. Each new entry into the series has been making mobbing sections denser and denser across the various areas, and especially with endgame content like the Maliwan or Guardian takedowns, and the multiple slaughter maps that are a big part of this game's identity, having a weapon capable of hitting multiple enemies at once is invaluable. One can only assume that Borderlands 4 is going to be even more chaotic and even more enemy dense than Borderlands 3, and if that is the case, then weapons like the Reflux, like the Brainstormer, like the Redistributor will become increasingly more helpful. The Reflux and Brainstormer especially are a metric crapload of fun to use, and I would absolutely love to see them come back in Borderlands 4. Another weapon that I would absolutely love to see return in Borderlands 4 is a weapon that has been in every single Borderlands game since the original, and that is the Skull Masher. The Skull Masher is an absolute staple of this franchise at this point, just like the Sledge's Shotgun and the Mongol. And while I'm not a huge fan of the latter two, the Skull Masher very quickly became my favorite sniper across these games. This sniper is absolutely godly in the original Borderlands, fantastic in Borderlands 2 and the pre-sequel, even despite my predisposition towards bolt-action sniper rifles in those games. And in Borderlands 3, when Gearbox finally got around to adding it with the second DLC, it was absolutely amazing as well. I think the main reason the Skull Masher stands out so much to me is that it's an incredibly versatile weapon. The Skull Masher fires 5 or 6 pellets at once depending on the game, which would make one assume it's not very good at any kinds of distance. However, the Skull Masher's pellet spread is so tight that it is still very formidable, even at long distances, which makes it a very good choice in almost any situation. The Skullmasher is one of the few weapons that has been in every Borderlands game and that has actually been strong in each game it was in, which cannot be said about the Bitch, for example. Speaking of the Bitch, our honorable mentions for this video are the Bitch and the Conference Call. The Bitch is another gun that has been in every Borderlands game, despite being called the Fatale in the pre-sequel, and was one of my favorite SMGs in Borderlands 2, right next to a Malawan Plasma Caster. The Conference Call, despite not being my favorite shotgun in the game, is incredibly powerful against larger bosses in Borderlands 2, and is a fantastic choice versus Hatterax the Invincible. So then why are they in the honorable mentions? Well, if you spend any amount of time using these weapons in Borderlands 3, you'll know that both the Bitch and the Conference Call are rather lackluster. The Bitch is fine, but certainly not even close to being a great choice, and the Conference Call is an absolute shell of its former self. So while I would love to see these weapons come back, that's only if they're more like their Borderlands 2 versions and not their Borderlands 3 versions. And finally, coming in at number 1, my most desired weapon to see return in Borderlands 4 is the Light Show. Now, I know that the Light Show isn't the absolute best of pistols in Borderlands 3, however, in my opinion, it is by far one of the most fun to use. This legendary Vladov pistol shoots 4 pellets in a clockwise rotating pattern. The Light Show is essentially a handheld bullet hose, and it is a very good bullet hose at that, capable of putting out loads of bullets per second, which is just loads of fun on any of the 4 Volt Hunters. Now, like I said before, the Light Show isn't the best option, and you're not going to be one-clipping the game's various raid bosses in most cases, but it is still an incredibly good option for mobbing and even regular bossing. Combine all this with the Light Show's genuinely super cool design and you have one of my favorite pistols in the game, and I would absolutely love to see it return in the next Borderlands game. There are a lot of guns in previous games that could make a comeback in Borderlands 4, and while it doesn't make sense to bring back every single weapon that has ever been in these games, I'm curious to know which weapons you would like to see come back in the next Borderlands game. Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a fantastic day.